So hospice has been such an important part of my life when it comes to the journey with my parents and their passing. And I'm very excited to be talking to Dr. Macie Smith today. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Kiki. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You have a great book that's out. It's called A Dementia Caregiver Called to Action, The Journey. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to put this book together?
So I would say it wasn't just one reason. There were a myriad of reasons. Number one, in my professional capacity, I am a gerontologist. I have a geriatric care management practice. And so I see people from all walks of life dealing with very similar issues and concerns when it comes to caring for someone with Alzheimer's and or a progressive type of dementia. And then it landed right at my feet with the development of dementia with my grandma. She was in her late 80s, but it was still not lesser of a impact to our family. And to see my dad, who was her primary caregiver, the baby boy, the only one that could really provide support, but he really couldn't provide but so much. And so having my sister step in to be the primary caregiver as well, being able to navigate that whole system with my family was a little challenging, Kiki, even though had already been in the industry at that time for about 15 years. They don't always listen to the baby of the family.
I know that.
And my daddy would say, "Baby girl, you got a doctor, but you ain't that type of doctor." So I'm like, "What?" Right? And so I really had to just kind of compartmentalize my roles, and that's what I try to tell my families too when I do consultations. Right now, I may not be the granddaughter or the daughter, but I'm the social worker, and God darn it, you gonna listen to this, you know what?
Mhm.
And so experiencing what I've experienced personally and seeing what other folks have experienced in their families, I wanted to have something meaningful and tangible and something that wasn't long and drawn out. As a very compact book, less than 60 pages, that takes family members through the journey. The book isn't necessarily for the person living with the condition because sometimes, they are in denial about what's
Mhm.
going on with them. And I can understand that plight because when you confess or you share that you're having difficulty in some area of your well-being, then you run the risk of losing your home, losing your independence. And so a lot of times older adults, they just keep things to themselves. And so I wanted to arm caregivers with tools, strategies that's relatable to their journey and really give them a step-by-step and guideposts on how to navigate that journey.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? Can you explain that?
I
I know
sure can.
it's very, very, I don't know. I can never get a good answer.
Oh, well, I'm praying that I'm gonna give you a good answer
Okay.
today. And so dementia itself is not the disease. It is the symptoms of the disease. So when you think of dementia, you think of memory loss, forgetfulness, inability to cope, inability to make decisions and make judgment, thinking through things. Those are symptoms of something that's impacting or impairing a person's cognitive ability. Alzheimer's disease is the actual disease, the most common disease that causes dementia, but there are over 100 causes of dementia. So if someone is presenting dementia symptoms, something has to be causing it. And so if you or your loved one is diagnosed with dementia, the very first thing you want to ask the doctor is what type of dementia it is and or what's causing it, because something has to cause it. You don't just wake up confused and nothing is causing that. And so
Mhm.
if you go to the doctor for a headache, the doctor is going to diagnose what's causing your headache and an infection or what have you. And so that's the same thing we want the doctors to do and family members to ask when they do go to the doctor with cognitive concerns.
So with my mom, I, we all felt like maybe she was getting dementia, but
Mhm.
everyone was afraid to say anything
Mm.
and nobody did anything well, I mean, not that nobody did anything. I shouldn't really say that, but I feel like nobody was taking action quick enough. How can we open up this conversation that we're trying to help. We're not here to, I know it must be so scary for the person with dementia, but
Right.
how can we just open up this conversation and say, mom, dad, grandma, um, I think we need some advice here. How do you even start that?
So, that's not an easy one-sided answer. I'm gonna tell you that
Mm-mm.
right now. It's very individualized. Some people are blessed to be able to have that conversation with their loved ones. They could say, "Mom, I'm concerned about your memory. You sound like you're slipping a little bit, so I want to escort you to the doctor so we can figure out what's going on." And if you have that type of mama, okay, baby, I'll do that. That ain't my mama, and it
Nope.
darn sure wasn't my grandmama. And so you definitely want to approach the topic with ease, with sensitivity, with compassion and empathy. A lot of times you don't need to say, I think you're slipping. I think you're losing your mind. I think you might have dementia, because the last thing any of us want to lose is our mind. And
Mhm.
so we want people to start thinking about brain health just like they think about their overall physical health. You go to the doctor every year to get your annual physical checkup. So during that physical checkup, you can also have a cognitive assessment done. In fact,
Oh.
Medicare now pays for a cognitive assessment to be done once a year along with the person's physical, because we know that it is a very sensitive topic. And a lot of times seniors don't want to talk about it, and family members don't want to address it because they know it's probably going to be a battle. But if you approach it from an overall health standpoint, they'll be more apt to go get that checkup. The other thing, Kiki, I always tell my caregivers too is to, along with their loved ones, set up an electronic health record with that primary care practice. Everyone should have a primary care doctor. You shouldn't be using the emergency room as a primary care practice. That's a no-no, because that's a hospitalist. That hospitalist doesn't know you or your loved one the way a primary care doctor would. When you sign up for that electronic health record, you have access to their medical information. You also have untethered access to the doctor. That way you can communicate what the person may not communicate with the doctor. So that way that visit that your mom or your dad won't allow you to go to, you already shared the information with the doctor, and they know, they have that in the back of their mind, and they know what to look for and what to assess, because they're going to the doctor's office, and for those 3 minutes they're in there, Kiki, they the sharp as a tack. But when they get
Yep.
home and you're like, "Nah, I know the doctor saw all of that going on," but he probably or she probably didn't. And so those are some ways to really have access to the medical practice, when your family member says absolutely not. And you want to get on that HIPAA form too. Sometimes they might let you on it, but that is just a way to kind of finagle that process, because family caregivers have to be in the know. They have to be involved, because if they're not healthy or informed, then they can't provide proper support to their loved one.
Mhm. I know, that's the problem, my parents weren't telling me anything, and I
Yeah.
live, 3,000 miles away, so they were always saying, "Oh, well, I didn't wanna bother you, and,
Yeah.
I didn't wanna worry you," but you have to. I mean, I don't know. It's not easy being a caregiver either. I think it's a lot it's a lot of work, first of all, but it's also very mentally tough.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that we kind of overlook as well. What do you think?
I do. We think about emotional well-being. That is really at the core of the care process when we're providing care to someone. Being compassionate and being empathetic, that comes from the core of the heart and the soul, and that's where your emotions are stored. And typically it attacks there first. When you get that diagnosis that your loved one is living with a life-limiting illness, it's like a spear goes through your heart,
Mhm.
immediately, a piercing pain. And so you have to be able to, number one, identify those feelings and emotions that you're going through. It's okay to be upset, angry, grieving, resentful. Those are all natural emotions that I talk about in my book, giving family members and caregivers permission to feel all the feels, and you have to name it. If you don't acknowledge it, you're not going to be able to address it. And so it's okay to have these emotions. Once you name it, then you can start to deal with it and put proper healthy supports around you to
Mhm.
continue to uplift you and support you, so that way you can continue to uplift and support your loved one.
I know. I think when I was taking care of my dad, especially, I was alone. It was during COVID, and I was
Mhm.
still able to go to the hospital. But first of all, you feel so alone.
Yeah.
And you know, with my dad, we were so hopeful. He had glioblastoma, but we
Mm.
thought it was lymphoma. So they were treating him, and he did the treatments, but we were so convinced that well, my dad and I, when I say we, that he was going to get better,
Yeah.
that I almost feel like we missed out a little bit on getting the deep emotions out and talking about, deeper things, because we were so worried about the treatment and what we were going to do next, that we didn't have the conversations I wish we did.
Yeah. And I think too, even if it's always gonna be a what if,
Mhm.
like what if this, and that's a part of the grieving process, Kiki, the bargaining. You go through the denial, you go through the anger, then you go through the bargaining, even while the person is still alive. We call that anticipatory grief. And then you get to the acceptance piece, and then that becomes a part of your mourning, right? Because
Mhm.
mourning is much longer than grieving. And so you're always going to have those thoughts. But, a lot of times emotions are shared non-verbally, right? You're
Mhm.
talking about what you thought you what should have said and what you thought you should have talked about, but it was still communicated in your nonverbal cues. Just you simply being there for him and him being there with you, that was communicative enough, because you still have to compartmentalize. You still have to do a lot of different things, because if you don't focus on the treatment, then you would say, we spent time doing this. We should have spent time doing that. So it's going to be a never ending cycle with it. But once you get to that acceptance phase, because you can't change it,
Mm-mm.
right? It is truly what it is. And so, I love the serenity prayer. I call it the salt and pepper prayer. God grant me the serenity to
Mhm.
accept the things that I can't change, and the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? I
Mhm.
keep saying that in my head, just in any situation. I deal with hospice a lot. I've become a part of my family's family, and it does get heavy, even for me, and that's called secondary trauma.
Mhm.
I'm dealing with someone else's trauma, but that's just a part of being human and being compassionate. And so, just learning the stages of grief and being able to identify with those stages, and you're able to again have that loss be a part of your living.
I think you're amazing, by the
Oh,
way.
thank
Thank you
you.
so much for this book and for all of your good advice. I would love to talk to you again.
Oh, well, I will be ready and available, not only because I love your name,
Oh.
Kiki, but because you're such a sweet soul. And I do enjoy speaking to audiences just about life living, healthy aging, of course, Alzheimer's and dementia, and then being able to have tangible resources. I'm very passionate about having tangible resources available to families. When I do my speaking engagements, Kiki, we're laughing, we're crying, but they're walking out of there with tangible resources, either with my book, usually with my book, and it is available on Amazon and at all the bookstores. But also, I have free downloadable family guides at synergyhomecare.com/resources. My blogs are there. I have videos there, just real resources that you can pull up on your phone, where you can have conversations with other family members. Not
Oh,
that you
wow.
said it. Dr. Macie says this, having that third
Right.
party is something, put it all on me. I don't mind at all, you know? And so that's important to me to have those tangible resources. And I don't want people to have to sift through any information and scour the internet for information. Go here and you're going to get it. It'll be a great starting point for you.
Oh my God. Dr. Macy, thank you so much for being with us today. And we are going to be talking soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.